Hello, welcome to this week's episode of The India Story. This is the show where we track the fast-paced developments in India for a global audience. We begin today with a special interview with veteran market investor Mark Mobius, who will explain why FIIs have started to return to the Indian market in a big way. Is this a trend that's going to continue? Mobius himself says he's planning to put in a whopping 30% of his funds into India. He explains why and tells us which are the top sectors in India where you should be investing your money. Next up, attention in India is turning to politics with just about a year to go for the next general election. The main opposition party, the Congress, got a major boost with a big victory in the assembly election in Karnataka with a landslide margin, 135 seats out of 224. But a big question that now arises, does this have any implication for 2024? And if so, what? Does it give the opposition a chance to put together a serious challenge to the BJP? Or does a state election have little bearing these days on the national mandate, especially given that the national mandate will probably revolve a lot around the personality of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister himself? So we're going to be decoding the Karnataka election right here with two of India's biggest political and election experts, Yashwant Deshmukh, founder and director of C-Voter, and political activist and analyst Yogendra Yadav. Also on the show tonight, we speak to Dharmic scholar and interfaith speaker Pandit Satish Sharma about an article in the UK's Daily Mail which claims that the Indian ruling party was allegedly responsible for instigating violence and stoking tension in Leicester last year. And finally, a chat with director and writer Satyajit Basu, whose film has been selected in one of the competitive sections at the Cannes Film Festival. All of this and much, much more on the show tonight. But first, a quick look at the major headlines. After days of intense negotiations and lobbying, Congress veteran Siddaramaiah to return as Chief Minister of Karnataka, Master Strategist D.K. Sivakumar appointed Deputy CM. The oath ceremony will be on the 20th of May. In a surprise cabinet reshuffle this week, Kiran Rijiju removed as India's Law Minister. Arjun Ram Meghwal appointed the new minister. Rijiju assigned Ministry of Earth Sciences. A major legal victory for India. A US court has approved the extradition of Tahabur Rana. The Pakistani-origin Canadian businessman is wanted in India to face trial for his involvement in the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. And the COP summit in Australia has been cancelled after the American President Joe Biden postponed his visit due to the debt ceiling talks in Washington. Indian Prime Minister Modi's trip to Australia, however, is continuing as per schedule. And now the big story. Foreign institutional investors who were on a massive selling spree for the most part of last year have returned to the Indian markets with a bang. The sentiment seems to have seen a complete turnaround since April 2023. FIIs are pumping money into India in a big way. So what has changed? Why are FIIs now turning bullish on India? And importantly, is this a passing phase or a more fundamental shift in FII behavior? We're going to be talking to Mark Mobius about that. But before we go and have a look at what he actually feels, do take a look at this special report.
The Indian equity markets have seen a lot of volatility in the past year. Although domestic institutional investors were buying heavily, foreign institutional investors were on a selling spree in 2022 and the first quarter of 2023. In 2022, FIIs sold Indian shares worth $17.2 billion, which took their aggregate holding to a multi-year low. But since April, things have seen a dramatic change. April 2023 marked the return of the foreign institutional investors in a big way. Global investors are once again turning bullish on India. FII were net buyers of Indian equities for 14 straight days, the longest in 3 years, tweeted market veteran Nilesh Shah on Wednesday. Global investors bought shares worth $2.74 billion. So what changed? A combination of factors seem to have contributed to this change in sentiment. India's economy has shown resilience despite several headwinds, both domestically and globally. Even if there is some slowdown in growth, India will remain the fastest growing economy in the world. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India's decision to pause rates along with inflation numbers on a downward trend fueled expectations that the central bank would continue to remain status quo on rates for some more time. Added to this, the rising tension between the West and Beijing, along with the fact that recovery in China hasn't been swift, led to a series of ramifications, including investors pulling money out of China. India was the obvious alternative. For billionaire investor Mark Mobius, the biggest allocations are to Taiwan and India. In fact, Mobius says allocation to India will only increase going forward. However, experts are of the view that no assumptions should be made from the recent spurt of FII buying. Instead, FII behavior over the long term should be observed before reaching any conclusions. The Indian equity markets have seen a lot of volatility in the past year.
Well, if you really want to understand what's happening anywhere in the world of financial markets, investing, whether it's investing in India, investing in China, investing in emerging markets overall, perhaps one of the most respected and best-known faces across the planet, Mark Mobius. And he now joins us. It's such a pleasure to be joined by him. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be talking to you about investing in India, of course. But first, your overall sense on what's happening in the world. How are emerging markets looking? Where are you investing? What's the world of investments looking like to you, Mark?
Right. Well, thank you very much for that nice introduction. The overall picture is pretty good, actually, because in the U.S., you're seeing the inflation rate to come down, which will mean that the pressure on the Fed to keep on raising interest rates will be less, and that will give more confidence to the market. So I think that's probably the scenario that will result in a better situation globally, not only for the U.S. market, but for the global market. And if you look at China, you'll see that actually they have been reducing interest rates pretty dramatically in an effort to get the economy in China going. And of course, that's generally good news for many other countries around the world, because, as you know, China is a very big factor in the trade and investment around the world.
Well, Mark, before I come to the inflation and interest rates and what's happening with all of that, you created quite a stir a month or so ago when you said you were not being able to get your money out of China. A lot of people got somewhat concerned by that. What's the situation there? Have things eased out a bit?
Yes, it has eased. I was able to get the money out. It's true that there are officially no restrictions on getting money out of China, but the paperwork and procedures required are quite intense. So I was able to do that, and everything is fine as far as that concerned. And we, of course, will not stop investing in China. We will continue to invest in China, but the situation there is looking a lot better than it was last year, and we're seeing some recovery in that market.
So when it comes to the issues that you had in the paperwork and the other problems, now, there are a lot of people who are saying there are risks there in China, which you need to be clear about. It could be paperwork in this case. It could be procedural. It could be a fresh crisis that comes with capital controls being imposed. Golden shares are suddenly happening in Chinese companies. So would you say that there are those risks in China, which any investor has to keep his or her eye on?
Definitely, that is going to continue. You're going to see companies diversifying their base of manufacturing and the base of supply away from China into India, Vietnam, Thailand, and a number of other countries around the world. Of course, in the U.S., some of the companies are bringing their manufacturing back home because with automation, they're able to do that without raising costs too dramatically. Nevertheless, China still remains a major supplier of people around the world, a major exporter. I don't see that diminishing, but of course, world trade, the whole globus of the world trade is going to be increasing. So China's share may decrease, but the total will be probably the same or increasing.
All right, Mark, now before I move to other developed markets, emerging markets and India, just staying with China for a second more. One of the big questions that's being spoken about for a while are possible disruptions in supply chains. We are seeing that many companies are trying to relocate some of their factories, moving them to other countries, including places like India. Is that a trend that you think is going to continue? And is that going to be a significant enough event with all those geopolitical risks around China? You were mentioning Taiwan. There could be a war at some point. Who knows? So is that an existential question around China, which isn't going to go away soon and therefore needs to be factored into investment decisions?
I don't see a recession coming in the U.S. simply because of the end of higher interest rates to begin with. And, of course, the move by the central bank, by the Federal Reserve, to rescue banks. You know, the big problem and the big risk for the U.S. would be a failure of the banking system. And we've seen a number of banks go under, but the Fed was very fast to react and to bail out all the depositors in those banks. And, of course, arrange mergers with the likes of J.P. Morgan and so forth. So I don't see the specter of recession anytime soon in the U.S.
Okay, one of the big questions when it comes to investing that people are looking at is what's going to happen in the developed markets. In the U.S., for example, still concerns. Inflation is still high. What's going to be happening to interest rates? Are those going to be lowered? Could there be recession? That entire fear has not gone away completely. What do you feel? Do you think there could be a recession? Is there going to be a soft landing?
Oh, there's no question. The debt is incredible. And if you look at credit card debt in America, you'll see that it's quite incredible. One of the good things about the higher interest rates is that it put a lot of these people on warning that built up big credit card debt not to do so. And some of that is being cleaned out. And of course, the mortgage market in America is a problem, particularly in the office sector, because with the arrival of Zoom and the arrival of all this remote working, a lot of the office space is empty. And that will create real problems for real estate companies in the office market. But I think all of these problems are surmountable because there is enough money in the system to finance these problems.
Well, the big issue, of course, with the high interest rates that we've been seeing is that it does have a massive impact on the tech sector. We saw that big slide last year. But many people will also argue that tech now has got a lot of value in it, especially after the correction that we have seen and considering all the big changes that we are seeing in AI and other sort of things. There are, of course, now some signs of recovery. NASDAQ up by, 20, 25, 30% in the last 2-3 months. What do you feel about that? Do you think tech is the place to be or other areas?
Well, you have to look at tech in many different areas. You have the tech companies that went public with no earnings and still are heavily in debt and also have no earnings. That's one part of the tech sector. Then you have the hardware sector. Companies like Apple are doing very, very well. Then you have the software sector, and that's divided into many different parts. For example, the companies that we have in Taiwan are doing the software, the design of chips. Then you have companies, many in India, of course, doing software for companies. They're doing that kind of thing. Now, if you look at this whole spectrum, you'll see those companies that are not earning money, that have debt, that went public on the back of the hope of the future, they're going to continue to be in trouble. And they will probably have to go under. But then you have these other companies like the Taiwan companies and the Indian companies that we own are doing very, very well. They have a high return on capital. They're increasing earnings. Those companies will do very well. So I think it's important for anybody looking at the tech sector to differentiate very carefully between where you are and what kind of companies you're looking at.
All right, Mark, let's turn to India now. I know you've been bullish on India for a very, very long period of time, and that bet hopefully has paid off rather well for you. How do you see India right now? Would you continue to put more and more money into India?
Yes, we've done very well in India, thank God. And I think India is very high on my list in terms of the future. We look at India not as a short-term kind of investment, but as a long-term investment, simply because you've got a young population, you've got a government that's moving into the digital age very quickly, and you've got companies coming into India to replace some of the manufacturing they had in China to be in India. So you have a combination of these things which are really very good for India and which will result in a continuing fast-growing Indian economy. We're very bullish on India.
Okay, so if you had to do asset allocation, how would you be dividing up your money right now? How much of that would actually be going into emerging markets and specifically a market like India?
Well, if you look at our portfolio, you'll see that Taiwan and India are the top allocations in our portfolio. I would probably, of course, we have a historical, we're long-term, and therefore we don't turn over the portfolio very much. But probably going forward, the allocation in India will probably increase to 35%.
Hang on, so you're saying you're going to have 30 to 35% of your money in India?
Yes.
That's a really high number.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a lot. And in India specifically, what would be the areas that you would be looking at then?
Well, we are now in the software area. We love Indian software companies. We're also in the metals area, manufacturing metals area, and we're in the healthcare sector. Those are the three sectors which for us appear very well. But the beauty of India is such a huge country. There's so many sectors we can look at. It's not like if you went into some of these other emerging markets, there's really maybe only one or two sectors you can get exposure to. In India, you've got incredible number of opportunities in many, many different sectors. So we're looking at everything in India, but currently those are the three that we're focusing on.
All right, Mark, there's been all this talk of de-dollarization, other currencies coming up, whether it's a Chinese currency, whether it's something backed by gold. Who knows? Perhaps the Indian rupee goes convertible at some point. Do you think this is something that is a really serious possibility that we should be tracking right now?
Oh, yes. It's already happening. I think the Americans made a big mistake in using their dollar dominance to punish Russia by restricting trade and transfers in dollars. That put a lot of people off dollars because any other country around the world will look at this and say, wait a minute, if I get in trouble with the U.S. government, they'll, grab our reserves or they'll do something to interrupt our trade in dollars. So I think that was a big mistake on the part of the U.S. government. And I think more and more people around the world are thinking of alternatives, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why cryptocurrencies continue to do well. And I think a lot of countries are trying to do something to replace the dollar as a reserve currency. However, it will not be easy. The dollar is still very widely accepted around the world. And the thing about the dollar is it's a free currency. You can trade it anywhere, except if you happen to be Russian. But
right.
It's interesting. A friend of mine here in Dubai, he said he was at the dinner and he saw a bunch of Chinese and they had dollars in their hands, paying out cash in dollars. So obviously, it's popular still.
All right, Mark Mobius, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. The overall headline I think that we will take from all of that is have faith in the India story and put a lot of your money into India. Thank you so much, Mark Mobius, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
But the Congress party hasn't been winning elections for a long, long time, but finally a big victory. It was game, set and match for the Congress in Karnataka as the party returned to power in the state, securing a remarkable victory with 135 seats. With this result, the BJP lost control of the only southern state under its rule. And all of this happening months ahead of the 2024 Lok Sabha polls, which is why there's a lot of interest in how this is potentially going to impact 2024. if at all. There are those who will say that a state election has absolutely no bearing on the national election. But let's just take a look at what actually did happen in Karnataka, where, as I said, the final tally stood at 135 for the Congress, 66 for the BJP. The JDS fell to 90.
With a mace, with a mantra and a message,
हमने नफरत से, गलत शब्दों से ये लड़ाई नहीं लड़ी. हमने मोहब्बत से, प्यार से, दिल खोल के ये लड़ाई लड़ी.
Rahul Gandhi in Karnataka, a marketplace of hatred has been shut down and shops of love have opened. This is how the Congress celebrated its first major solo victory since the 2019 general elections in the quarter-final of next year's Lok Sabha polls. The Karnataka election results have resulted in a lot of speculation about its impact on the 2024 elections. Let's take a look at three ways in which ripples from the southern state might reverberate across the nation, but whether it will rock some boats remains to be seen. The most obvious fallout might be that Congress may find greater acceptance among other opposition parties during talks for a possible alliance for 2024. Before the Karnataka result, those leading the campaign for a joint opposition charge like Telangana Chief Minister K. Chandrasekhar Rao and West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee were gunning for the Congress. While KCR said that Congress and BJP are the same, with Tera Ambani to Mera Adani, Mamata Banerjee claimed that the Congress and BJP have an unholy alliance. After the Karnataka result, Mamata said that she is ready to support Congress where it is strong, with the caveat that the party must not oppose her in Bengal. Some other non-BJP parties were circumspect in their congratulations. In their first reactions, Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav hailed the message that Karnataka sent to BJP, and Lalu Yadav's RJD mocked the BJP over the Bajrang Dal controversy, but didn't name the Congress. The second way in which Karnataka might affect the Lok Sabha elections is the campaign agenda. In Karnataka, the BJP deepened on its religious narrative, with issues like the Bajrang Bali controversy and the Uniform Civil Code, apart from development promise of double-engine government. To counter this, the Congress focused on local issues and pushed its promise of 5 guarantees: free electricity, free rice to poor, unemployment allowance to the youth, financial aid to women heads of families, and free bus travel for women. During the 2019 campaign, the Congress had announced a minimum income guarantee scheme for the poor, but mainly attempted to counter the Modi narrative by raising allegations of corruption in the Rafale jet deal with slogans like "Chaukidar Chor Hai." The party can now be inspired to replicate the Karnataka model and pick local issues to take the attention away from BJP's messaging. However, voter behavior is often different in state elections and parliamentary elections. This places a question mark on how successful a local agenda would be in a national poll. Karnataka is the only southern state where BJP has ever been in power. With its defeat, the Saffron Party has lost the state, which could be its gateway to the rest of South India. But will this impact the BJP's tally in the Lok Sabha? Karnataka sends 28 MPs to the Parliament's lower house. In the current Lok Sabha, 25 of them belong to the BJP. The Congress has just 1. If the latest assembly results are projected onto parliamentary constituencies, then the Congress may win 20, the BJP 4, and the JDS 1, with 3 up for grabs. But Karnataka's voters appear to have different preferences for the state and the centre. In the 2018 assembly polls, Karnataka threw up a hung verdict, but in the 2019 general elections, the state voted emphatically for the BJP. In the 2013 assembly election, the Congress won 122 out of 224 seats, while the BJP won just 40. But in the 2014 parliament polls, the Saffron Party took 17 seats, while Congress won 9. Similarly, in the 2008 state polls, The BJP had 110 seats and the Congress 80, but in the 2009 national elections, the difference was huge, with BJP winning 19 and Congress winning 6. Thus, there are good and some not so encouraging takeaways for both sides from the Karnataka polls. How the parties implement their learnings with 1 year to go before the big election remains to be seen. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
So how is Karnataka and other political developments going to impact the run-up to 2024? Well, as always in India, the answer to that really depends pretty much on whom you talk to. And we're going to get two different political voices, divergent political voices, to help us understand that. Let's start, of course, by talking to Yogendra Yadav, who's not now a sophologist anymore, but Yogendra, you do spend all of your time looking at politics, and I think it's probably better to describe you as a political activist right now. But how do you think it's looking? How do you think 2024 is now looking after what's happened in Karnataka?
I'm glad you clarified, Vikram, because I don't pretend to be a neutral political analyst. I'm a political activist. But political activists must not lie to themselves. To my mind, the biggest significance, the real significance of Karnataka Assembly election goes beyond Karnataka, and which is that it still keeps 2024 in an open mode. 2024 is an open election, which is not how the BJP would like it to be. The BJP ideally would like there to be a walkover before the match begins. But Karnataka verdict has ensured that the opposition now has the morale. Post Bharat Jodo Yatra, the momentum that the Congress gained seems to be persisting. This does not, of course, ensure that the Congress will win or the opposition will win 2024. It doesn't even ensure that they would win Karnataka in 24. What it does ensure is that it still is an open match.
Right, Yogendra. So, the big question, of course, that is going to be asked is the extent to which any state election can be seen as forecasting what happens in a national election, especially after what happened in 2018, 2019. I mean, look, whatever happened in Karnataka, it was a vote for the Chief Minister of Karnataka, not a vote for the Prime Minister of the country, and that's where then the Narendra Modi factor and all could start to kick in potentially in the general election. As I was saying, even in 2018, you had the Congress winning Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, losing all of those states when it came to the national election.
We cannot be sure. It is true that Karnataka Assembly election does not point even to the Telangana Assembly elections, which are likely to happen in a few months' time. And Karnataka is one of those states where we have seen split voting, one way in Assembly, another way in Lok Sabha. So, as I said, it's not sure. No one can be confident that Karnataka Assembly election results definitely points to a BJP defeat or a Congress victory in 2024. But the important thing is simply this, and that's the point I wanted to underline, that if the BJP had won Karnataka Assembly election, then doors for 2024 would have been shut. Everyone in television studios in discussions like this would be saying 2024 is a done deal. Let's talk about 2029. That's not happening. If BJP had won, they would have said Bharat Jodo Yatra phus ho gayi, finished. No point in talking about it. Rahul Gandhi people still think is a pappu. Congress is a non-starter. All that has not happened. That, to my mind, is important. There is a battle. No one can be sure of what the battle would achieve, but there is a battle, and that itself is important in times like this. And the second important thing of Karnataka verdict is that it shows us a template that the opposition can use. And to my mind, the template is very simple. Focus on the bottom of the pyramid, base of the pyramid. If you look at 4 variables, caste, the Congress got support of Ahindas, which are the SC, ST, OBC Muslims of Karnataka. Class, the poorer you are, the higher is the lead for the Congress among the voters. Gender, women gave Congress much bigger margin than was the case among men. And rural urban, it's only in the rural areas that Congress has actually won this election. In the urban areas, it was neutralized. So the template for the opposition for 2024 is focus on the bottom of the pyramid, align your policies and priorities to the bottom of the pyramid, keep it simple, do not get distracted in Bajrang Bali or any such stuff, and hold your nerves. If that is what opposition can achieve, it still is an open game.
Now, Yogendra, I remember you yourself rather famously a couple of years back had said that the Congress party needs to die for the opposition to survive. And that, I suspect, was really because then there would have been space for the other opposition parties to come up and to challenge the BJP at a time. And it was looking as if the Congress was not actually in a position to do so. What is your sense right now? Is the Congress actually in a position to fight the BJP in the states where it is strong? And also, how will this result now affect this entire game of opposition unity and how will that play itself out? Because it could be argued that the Congress becomes more assertive than it would have been if it had lost Karnataka as well, and therefore its demands therefore go up more and it's tougher to have opposition unity.
Vikram, I said Congress must die. This was 2019, just in the wake of exit polls, when it was absolutely clear that the Congress did not even contest the election seriously. There wasn't even a serious challenge. And I had said, if you cannot take this assault on the Constitution by the BJP in such a critical election, you might as well not exist. What we have witnessed in the last 1 year or so is Congress has shown willingness to come to the street. The Bharat Jodo Yatra and many other things that Congress has done show a willingness to take on the BJP, willingness to take to street, mobilize people, and willingness to speak about big issues that need to be spoken about. I do not remember any mainstream opposition party leader talking about Adani. Rahul has shown the courage to talk about Adani, to talk about the biggest international scandal. It's not even a national scandal, it's an international scandal that the Indian media wouldn't touch. Rahul has shown this capacity to address it. So yes, if someone is doing what I always thought Congress was not doing, then they deserve to be supported. About opposition unity, Vikram, my thesis has been, and I've been writing about it, that it's a massively overplayed factor. A grand nationwide Mahagathbandhan of the opposition is neither likely nor necessary, not even desirable, because in a sense it would give Mr. Modi just that thing that he needs. Everyone is against me, poor me against everyone else, things of that kind. And if you look at the electoral geography of India, state by state, actually, wherever you need opposition unity, it has already been achieved. Maharashtra, Bihar, Jharkhand, Tamil Nadu. And in most other places, it's either unachievable, Uttar Pradesh or Karnataka, or there is no one to ally with. Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. Who do you have opposition unity with? So in a sense, this whole emphasis on opposition unity, to my mind, is really overplayed. In any case, it's premature. Yes, no one party will be able to replace the BJP. Yes, every party is taking on the BJP in their own respective states. And yes, there will be opposition unity, I can guarantee you, within 48 hours after the election results. But trying to achieve it a year before the election is premature and is counterproductive.
All right, Yogendra Yadav, it promises to be a really interesting and exciting year ahead, and we'll keep coming back to you to get more and more perspectives on the way things are panning out. Thank you so much for having joined us. Well, let's get another point of view also on what Karnataka may or may not mean for 2024. Joining us now, Yashwant Deshmukh, election analyst, director and founding editor of C Voters. Also been doing a lot of sample sizes to try and figure out exactly what is coming up. Hi, Yashwant. So you've also been looking at the data. You've done a number of polls out there. What are the numbers telling you? What could Karnataka possibly mean for 2024?
Well, one thing is clear, Vikram, that, in the last 10 odd years, we have seen this phenomena of split vote setting in all the other states. And by the way, Karnataka was actually one of those states which started the split voting. I mean, picking up a different party in different layers of election way back, at the time of Ramakrishna Hegde ji so So I would strongly suggest that anybody who is trying to draw too much from Karnataka result for 2024, I would be very, very cautious to do that, because when we did the exit poll, Vikram, where we clearly pointed out that Congress is winning Karnataka, hands down it is winning Karnataka. And in fact, in the last 18 months, Vikram, in our tracker, there was not even a single day that BJP's vote share actually overtook Congress in that one. So it was a very crisp and clear mandate. But in the same exit poll, when we asked 40,000 people across Karnataka, we also asked, whom would you have voted for if today, if the Lok Sabha elections would have voted? So the approximately 5-point lead that the Congress was having in the raw data got into a almost 9-point deficit on this particular question, which means there was almost a 15 percentage, reverse swing of sort on the question of Vidhan Sabha voting intent and the Lok Sabha voting intent. So this is pretty much in line with the phenomena that we have been observing in the last 10 odd years, Vikram, that people have different voting preferences. However, what would be interesting to see, what if Karnataka impact also gears up Congress into winning cycle of other state elections which are slated this year. Say, for example, Telangana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. And if at all Congress manages to win a couple of more, then will it have a different kind of an impact on the national mood or not? That remains to be seen.
Right. Yashwant, what you're saying is really interesting when it comes to the data, because let's remember the Congress won many of those states in 2018, went on to lose all of those states virtually with a full landslide margin when it came to 2019. Now, you're saying that your data is saying that on the day of the Karnataka election, if there had been a national election in Karnataka, the BJP would have swept Karnataka, although the Congress won by a landslide in Vidhan Sabha. That's what you're saying the data is showing you.
Absolutely. We kind of try to quantify that number, and we realize that if the election would have happened on the same day, Congress would have won with the scale which it won, but BJP probably would have won 20 to 22 Lok Sabha seats out of 28 in Karnataka on the same day. And so that's a kind of a contrast as far as the Lok Sabha and the assembly voting intents are concerned.
All right, Yashwant, so difference between Vidhan Sabha and Lok Sabha is something that everyone should keep in mind. Now, a lot of people are also trying to figure out what the opposition is going to do to try and get some sort of unity, make everything bipolar. That's the lesson that some in the opposition are deriving. Make everything into a bipolar contest, have a one-to-one fight in every seat across the country versus the BJP. Make it also some sort of a collection of state elections. That's the way to go. What would be your interpretation or your analysis of that?
But Karnataka was hardly bipolar. Janata Dal Secular did not go hand in hand with the Congress. In fact, the evidence suggests the other way around, Vikram, because in 2019 Lok Sabha, Karnataka, Congress and JDS were in alliance. And that actually ended up giving BJP 51% vote share over there. We have seen the bipolarity is actually in Uttar Pradesh, for example, when Sapa and Baspa, SP, BSP came together in Uttar Pradesh, that ended up BJP securing almost 50% votes. And that bipolarity of the election actually ended up helping the BJP. And it is very easy to understand why does that happen, Vikram, for a simple reason that we forget many a time that all these non-BJP, non-Congress parties, which are in by the way, which are ruling so many states at this point of time, their roots of their electoral success, Vikram, have been into anti-Congressism at large. All these Janata Parivar constituents of yesterday, their entire political game plan started with being anti-Congressism in nature. So whenever we talk about a complete opposition unanimity in that way, somehow we forget that there would be number of voters which would not be voting for them simply because they do not like Congress in that way. That bipolarity, or in that way, there are inherent contradictions as far as the opposition unity is concerned. So a big number of people, Mayawati supporters who did not vote to support a SP candidate, they voted for the BJP. So, and vice versa. That happened, and that drove the BJP vote share up. Janata Dal secular voters who did not vote for the Congress candidates in Karnataka, they voted for the BJP. And still Janata Dal Secular has got 12% votes in Karnataka. So while this all looks good on paper in arithmetic, but this is highly flawed calculation as per my limited understanding. Arithmetic and chemistry, we all know, are two different things. Many a time when they work fine, it's okay. But if the chemistry doesn't work well, then arithmetic goes for a toss.
Right, Yashwant Deshmukh, you've given us a lot to think about. As I've been saying, it's going to be a fascinating year. Lots to understand, lots to analyze, lots to interpret, lots to think about. Thank you so much for joining us to help us understand some of the permutations. Well, let's move on now to our segment where we take a look at some of what the global media is actually saying about India. One particular report we're going to dive into in some detail. The British newspaper, the Daily Mail, has in a report that has raised many eyebrows, said that the violent ethnic clashes that had occurred in Leicester last year were, according to it, quote-unquote, stoked by Prime Minister Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party. It quoted an unnamed British security source, and the report said there was evidence of activists linked to the BJP using cloud WhatsApp groups to encourage Hindu protesters to take to the streets. Those clashes had erupted between Hindu and Muslim youths following an India-Pakistan cricket match in August last year. And let's get a quick reaction to that from Pandit Satish Sharma, who's joining us from London, Dharmic scholar, interfaith speaker, somebody who actually went to Leicester just after that particular violence, and he'd spoken to us at that time as well. Pandit Sharma, thank you so much for joining us. We'd spoken to you just after the Leicester violence which had happened there. Just wanted to get your reaction to this article that's come out in the Daily Mail, which essentially is saying that groups linked to the BJP were responsible for the violence that took place in Leicester. Now, you went there just after the violence. How would you respond to or react to this particular report?
This article in the Daily Mail, a couple of observations. Firstly, the Daily Mail is not really accepted as a reference material. It's not accepted as journalism which is valid. It has a bias, and its bias is very often seen in anti-India, anti-Hindu rhetoric. I myself was the target of a hit job by the Daily Mail a few years ago, and it claimed something like Modi's BJP lands on the shores of this country, and I have nothing whatsoever to do with the BJP, and indeed have not had the honour of meeting Prime Minister Modi. So the fact that it's the Daily Mail is not something that should be relied upon as a source of evidence. Scrutinizing the article, you'll notice also they have some mysterious source providing mysterious evidence, and neither the source is cited nor indeed the evidence presented. So it is little more than a dog whistle. It's an invitation to flagellate Indians, Hindus, and indeed anything to do with Prime Minister Modi ji.
Well, you know, one of the specific comments that is there in the article, it said that there were WhatsApp groups that were saying stand up and confront, the Pakistani gangs and the other gangs that were there in Leicester. Were those WhatsApp messages actually circulating?
I've not seen any of those WhatsApp messages. And to give you a bit of background, as we spoke last time, immediately after the Leicester violence, I was probably one of the few who, within 2 days, was in Leicester to try and find out what was going on. I was interviewing and doing research with regard to exactly who was at what place at which time. I met local politicians, I met local community leaders. And so when I produced the first report, I think it was broadcast on YouTube and a few other channels. When we produced the report that there was no evidence whatsoever of any whatever this BJP Hindutvadi extremism is on the streets of Leicester, nobody refuted it. There was actually no evidence whatsoever that there was a presence of extremist elements who were associated with the BJP. We have in this country an organization called the Overseas Friends of the BJP. And it's really a support organization. It gathers funds. It tries to create some sort of a narrative where perhaps a narrative is lacking when it comes to the functions and the announcements of the BJP, but it's not politically active. It doesn't engage in trying to influence the politics of this country. There are the usual hotheads who make all sorts of claims, but they are not spokespersons for any organizations. So no, there was no evidence whatsoever whatsoever, including WhatsApp sort of groups. I'm a member of many of the WhatsApp groups that do with our community. And there was absolutely nothing to imply that Hindus should engage in violence, that Hindus should engage in robust responses to the violence that was being directed at us. It was absent. It was noticeable by its absence, in fact.
All right, Pandit Sharma, we leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much for joining us. We will dive into these stories in a little bit more detail as we go forward. Thanks for being with us. And finally, the Festival of Glitz, Glamour and Cinema, the Cannes Film Festival, kicked off this week at the French Riviera. This year's festival is the 76th edition of cinema's biggest showcase, made up of screenings, press conferences, and lots of glamorous parties. From films to the red carpet, global celebrities are in attendance, including some of the top stars from India. Now, 4 Indian films will premiere at the prestigious event, including Kennedy by Anurag Kashyap, Agra by acclaimed film director Kanu Behel. A restored version of renowned Manipuri director Aribam Sharma's 1990 film Ishanu will also be played in the Cannes Classic section. But there is only one Indian film that is actually competing this year at the festival, director Yudhajit Basu's diploma film Nehemich, which is one of the top contenders in the last Cinef section. This Marathi short film is set against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic, and it tells the tale of a young girl from a nomadic tribe who's banished from a village and forced to stay in a dilapidated hut for the duration of her menstruation period. And with all attention now shifting to Cannes, great pleasure to be joined by Yudhajit Basu himself. Yudhajit, first of all, many congratulations and all the best for that competitive segment. Tell us a little bit about this competitive segment, and then we'll talk about the film itself.
Thank you very much. It's a student section in Cannes. It was previously called Cinef Foundation, and this year they have changed the name to La Cinef. And they select films from film school films from all around the world. And I think this year there are 14 live action films and 2 animation films, mine being one of the live action films. And it's the only Indian selection in La Cinef this year in competition. So I'm very happy to be there in Cannes, and I'm looking forward to it.
Right, it's a tough competition obviously out there. So this, just to understand, this was your diploma film, am I right?
Yeah, it was my diploma film from FTII.
All right. Now, tell us a little bit about this film. It is, of course, set at the time of the COVID pandemic, but it's not entirely about that. It's about exile. It's about this particular lady having a menstrual period, having to be exiled just because she's having a menstrual period.
I think this film has several layers and themes and not a central theme. If I have to narrow it down to a central storyline, it would be about a girl trying to elope with her lover, who is a windmill guard, during the pandemic, while the girl is herself is isolated with other women in a hut during her menstrual cycle. So I think the film deals with menstruation and how it is still looked at as taboo in India today, and also about the fear of the pandemic. But in addition to these 2 social themes, on an artistic level, which I was very interested in, was to bring out the contrast of death and beauty, which happened during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we used to see that the sky would become very beautiful and the jungles would be very fresh and green because there were less pollution, less human habitation. People were dying. So nature in some case nature was like indifferent to the death of people. So there was a very stark contrast between beauty of nature and people dying. So this impacted me strongly. And that also is another aspect of the film that I wanted to bring out, the sense of fear through beauty.
Would you say that another major aspect that you're trying to tell through this film was essentially about taboos? I mean, the taboo, for example, that still persists around something like menstruation in 2023, that taboo still exists. You chose, of course, to set this at the time of the pandemic, although you're telling a story about a taboo. What is the reason for that?
I was only interested in the story of these women who were huddled inside a hut during menstruation. And as I talked to many villages, what I understood is that as other human beings, what we went through during the pandemic, we were all isolated. And if anyone got COVID, that person had to be, isolated from the others, and they were untouchables while they were going through COVID. So as what the entire world went through during the pandemic, these women go through this experience every cycle of the menstruation. So it was very striking for me. And I felt that what happened to these women during the COVID, whether they were still isolated in huts, that I wanted to research, but I didn't have a very clear answer from anyone, naturally, because no one was out during the COVID days. So I thought of, introducing this theme of the pandemic, where everyone is isolated, and these women who go through this isolation every menstrual cycle, even during the times when the world is normal.
All right, Yudhajit, all the best, of course, with that and all the other films that you're working on. Thank you so much for joining us here on the India Story. And that's all we have time for this week. But do join us again next week. India Story will continue to bring you the big news makers out of India and all the big news developments as well. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.